Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas Newfer. I am a PhD student at UMass Amherst, and I'm here today to talk through the Climate Smart plant selection tool hosted by climatesmartnativeplants.org or C-SNaP. So when you come to this website, again, that's climatesmartnativeplants.org, linked below in the video description. We've got this home page here describing the C-SNaP initiative. This is sort of a sister site to the Northeast RISCC site and a place to host resources and tools related to the use of climate smart native plants in gardening and in ecological restoration. So there's some background, here at the top about who's created this site and these resources and what the goals are. If you scroll down a little bit farther, you'll find some information about why we should use native plants, all the great benefits of native plants in gardening and restorative activities, and then why and how we should be thinking about climate change and choosing climate smart species to garden and engage in restoration into the future. We'll come back to these tools, but before we get there, I just also want to highlight the information resources page, which links to a lot of the Northeast RISCC research to practice papers related to this topic, including this Climate Smart Gardening 2.0 research to practice paper that the tool I'm about to talk through is sort of built around. But there's some other resources as well about avoiding potentially invasive ornamental plants. And again, more resources about climate smart gardening and why to plant native species. There's also a contact us page in case you want to find out more about the groups behind these tools or get in touch with suggestions or feedback. But let's go back to our homepage and let's scroll down and choose our Climate Smart Plant Selection tool for today. So when we click on this tool, it's going to take us to the tool interface. There's a little bit of information up top about how to use this tool, but I'm going to talk you through all of this. We're going to skip it for now. So let's scroll down and look at this sidebar here on the left. And this is really how we interface with this tool. So the purpose of this resource is to provide a list appropriate to your state. So these are sort of, the database here is sorted by state. Provide a list to you of climate resilient native and near native species that are, available to be used in gardening, as well as all the sort of relevant horticultural information that you might want when you're creating a shopping list for your garden center. So the first thing that we want to do is choose the state that we're in, because again, the backing behind this are state lists. So I'm in Massachusetts, I'm going to choose Massachusetts. And this is going to give us 590 climate resilient species included in this data set for the state of Massachusetts. Now, we have the option to choose some filtering preferences and some sorting preferences. And I'm going to start with filtering preferences. What these do is they actually reduce the number of rows, so reducing to fewer than 590 species based on whether the species is a match for what I'm looking for here. So let's say for the sake of this exercise that I am only interested in annuals, perennial herbs, grasses, and biennial herbs. I don't want, and I'll take ferns too, but let's say I don't want any vines, trees, or shrubs. So by selecting these, I've reduced it to 403 plants by filtering out those woody habits that I wasn't interested in. You can also do this with climate status, so persistent native or persistent near native. And if you're confused about what any of these attributes actually mean, you can sort of hover over the name of the column and it's going to give you a little bit of more information or metadata. And you can also check out the research to practice paper, which kind of gives you the full background on what these mean. Our climate status here is describing whether the species is historically native in that given state. So if it's historically native in that state and it's predicted to persist in the future, we'd consider it a persistent native. Now, persistent near native describes a species that is not historically given or historically native in the given state, but it's historically native in a nearby state that shares a level 3 ecoregion. So if there's a state that shares a level 3 ecoregion with Massachusetts that the species is historically native to, but not Massachusetts, and it's going to be suitable in Massachusetts in the future with climate change, it would be a persistent near native. So if you're only interested in looking at native species or near native species, you could use this climate status checkbox to filter those out. I'm interested in both, so I'm going to leave that unchecked. For sun level, I just moved. My new apartment has some full sun and some part shade, so I'm going to choose both of those options. And let's say that my soil is probably dry or medium. So we're going to filter this down. Now we're down to 334 species that would work in this site. So now we're going to look at our sorting preferences. And the sorting preferences don't reduce the number of rows in the data set, but they are going to reorder the rows so that the species that are the best fit kind of arise to the top. The sorting preferences are also going to determine what additional columns show up in this data set. So right now we have some sort of basic information, the name and hardiness zone ranges, and then these filtering columns, but not much else. So let's dive into the sorting preferences. If I want to make sure that the species is suitable for my current hardiness zone, I can choose that here. So I'm in zone 6. This will be especially useful if the state that you live in, if it's a large state, if there's a lot of hardiness zones. So maybe if you live in Maine or something, you might want to be sure to select your hardiness zone to filter out species that aren't currently suitable for your specific zone. So I've chosen zone 6. I'm not particularly picky about flower color, but I'm going to check all of these because what that's going to do is it's going to mean that that column appears on the interactive table. So I'm not sort of filtering or sorting based on color, but it's showing up here now as an attribute. For this garden aggressive column, these are going to be sort of species that that might grow really aggressively or escape a garden quickly. I have a small yard and close neighbors, so I'm going to say that I only want species which are not garden aggressive. There might be some contexts where a more aggressive species is totally fine. We have all these other attributes too, our bloom period, our interesting foliage, maximum height. We can choose what pollinators we're interested in supporting. I'm going to say that I want to support butterflies. So I'm going to choose butterflies, both as pollinators and a larval host. And I'll also specifically include monarchs, which kind of get their own special category. And I'll throw moths in there too. I like all those lepidopterans. Then there's some propagation keywords you can choose to filter by. You can choose whether you want a showy species. I do want showy plants in my garden. Some information about soil type. I'm just going to choose to select all of those so that the column appears, and same for wildlife services here. In wildlife services, we have birds, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, insects, and not specified. So we're going to give this a moment to load as I've taxed the server a little bit here. And while we wait for this, this is a good time to mention that this tool is still under development. And so as you use it, you may run into server capacity issues. Just like it happened for me, it may gray out for a moment, and you may need to give it a moment or to reload. And certainly if you run into any other technical issues with the site, please get in touch with us and so that we can have that feedback and make changes in the future. Okay, but now we've got our species list. So we haven't changed that 334 species that we had earlier, but we've changed the order of them. And that happens using this match score column. The match score represents the percentage of these criteria that are met by a single species. So where I have these 100% match score, that is going to be a species which is appropriate for my hardiness zone. It has data on flower color. It's not garden aggressive. It supports, butterflies, monarchs, moths. It's showy, and we also have soil type data and, something here in the wildlife services column. So those 100% match are going to be the sort of best fit for my characteristics. If we scroll way further down, you can see some of these species that have like a 71% match score. They're not quite as perfect. Maybe they're still suitable for my hardiness zone, but if we scroll over, we see we're missing data on pollinators, or they're not showy, or they don't have data on showiness. Maybe they have pollinator data, but they don't support butterflies or moths as pollinators, like this one, which is wind pollinated. So they're not really as great matches for what I'm looking for my purposes. And you can kind of keep going down like that and see how well a species fits your criteria. So the reason that we have that match score in there is because if you choose a lot of sorting preferences, some of them, may conflict with each other a little bit. Additionally, we don't have horticultural data for every single one of these criteria for every single one of these species. So we don't want to reduce your list too much just because we're missing data. And speaking of missing data, I just want to mention that where we have these sort of blanks, that stands in for a no data or an NA value. So if there's a blank here for this species, which is hairy beak grain, that's not to say that it doesn't support any pollinators at all, or if there's a blank, if there's a not specified wildlife services, it's not that that species doesn't support wildlife. We just don't have the specific data to indicate which wildlife it supports or, how the species is pollinated. All right, so we have a pretty good plant list here. It's sorted here by the match score, and then within that, by alphabetically by scientific name. But if you wanted to resort the list for some reason, you could absolutely do that. So you could resort by your maximum hardiness zone. You could sort, out your color categories here, or sort by garden aggressive, or anything like that that you're interested in. So I'll come back and resort by match score here. And we can also use this search feature. And the search, just something to know about it, is that it's only going to search columns that are displayed. So right now, we have this like propagation keywords. It's not displayed here. So if I were to search rhizome, nothing is going to come up because I don't have that column in the data set. Whereas if I choose to display propagation keywords, I can search rhizome again, and I will probably find a number of species where their propagation description here is going to mention propagating via rhizome. So you can change again what columns display in order to have a more effective search here. So I'm pretty happy with my plant list. I have lots of species to choose from, even lots of perfect match species to choose from. Now, what I can do is I can export this list, and I have a few format options. I can do it in a CSV, in an Excel spreadsheet, or as a PDF. I'm going to choose a PDF because it's really nice to be able to just print this out and take this to your garden store to go shopping. If you have a lot of columns selected, or some of the bigger columns, like the propagation description, this text is going to start to get really small. It's going to get hard to read. And so you might have an easier time using one of the spreadsheet formats, or, remove a few columns so that it's printable if that's your intention. So I've got that. I've printed it out. Now the challenge is actually finding these species in stores, right? Well, up here in this explanatory tooltip, we have some sources of where you might actually be able to find these species for sale. So there's some linked native plant directories, native plant nursery directories, and we don't maintain these directories. We certainly don't maintain the nursery offerings, but these are some good resources through various projects like Wild Ones, the Audubon Society, the Homegrown National Park Initiative, the Xerces Society, and this is a crowdsourced list of genotype identified nurseries. So you could look for native plant nurseries in your region or online using those resources to try to go shopping for these plants. Finally, I just want to come down to the bottom here and emphasize one more thing, which is that we have a recommended citation. Again, this tool is based off of the Climate Smart Gardening database, which is linked under the Information tab here, and was supported by the USGS Northeast Climate Adaptation Science Center. And I want to especially emphasize some of the folks who produced this, including especially Kabira Singh, who did a lot of the work designing this interface and making this into an interactive tool so that you could use it. So that's pretty much everything. This is a pretty simple resource. And again, if you have any questions, just reach out through the Contact Us page. But hopefully this is a helpful tool for you to choose some climate resilient native plants for both present and future gardening in your state in the Northeast. Thanks so much. Bye.